Thank you, everyone. This is Jim Minow. I'm the executive director of the Cure JM Foundation. Moving into my fifth year in this position, I am as excited and enthusiastic as I've ever been about the direction of the organization and the really significant accomplishments that we're making, not only in the research field, but I think also in working with pediatric rheumatologists, across the country at a large number of institutions, focusing on how we also improve the quality of JM care. I feel we're making some good progress there, and all of this progress is made possible through all of the hard work that you all do as our volunteer leaders, our fundraisers, our ambassadors, and through the relationship that you have with our doctors. So thank you very much for all of that. I'm going to talk give a little bit of a report on the success of the Holiday Challenge that I think most, if not all of you, participated in, and then move into a brief sort of outcomes report from our recent board planning retreat. Talk a little bit about some of our research priorities and directions, and then answer some questions that you might have. I see some more people joining, so that's terrific. You haven't missed, for those of you who just got on, you haven't missed much so far. Again, I wanted to thank all of you for really your extraordinary leadership and participation in this year's Holiday Challenge. We ended up reaching and exceeding our stretch goal of $400,000, which, when you add to that the $150,000 challenge that we had, we raised over $500,000, $550 million in the program this year. So please give yourself a round of applause, pat yourself on the back. I can't tell you how grateful I am to all of the families who participated in the Holiday Challenge, and especially to Shannon and her team on the staff side for all of their terrific leadership as well. This year we had 2,500 gifts to the Holiday Challenge, and some are still coming in. So it was, for an organization of our size, to have this kind of presence in online fundraising and internet fundraising is, I have to tell you honestly, I've never seen anything quite like it in my career. What our families do in the Holiday Challenge, and increasingly on Facebook. So those of you who have Facebook fundraisers, thank you all so very much for reaching out. It's one of our fastest growing areas of fundraising. There just are not many organizations, and certainly no organizations of our size who achieve what we do through family outreach. Our grassroots, through our chapters, through our walks, through the Holiday Challenge, is, you guys are the heart and soul of this organization. No question about it. No matter where you are in the country, and no matter what you do to help advance our mission, whether you're really focused on the Holiday Challenge or on Walk Strong to Cure JM, or do your own family fundraisers, is you've just made an extraordinary difference. We this year, we're through the first quarter of this year. Really, we just closed. Our fiscal year begins on October 1st, so our first quarter ends on December 31st, essentially the last day of the Holiday Challenge. And I'm very happy to report that we, as I mentioned, we met our Holiday Challenge goal. We have also met our goal, or are very close to meeting our goal for major gifts for this year. So I think we're, with 9 months to go in the year, 8.5 months to go in the year, I think we are very well positioned to hopefully exceed our 2.2, almost $2.3 million budget. I hope, somewhat significantly, given how strong our first quarter has been. So I know certainly that all of us on the staff, as well as the board of directors, are very focused on having a banner year, and we need a banner year because as we move more and more into clinical trials and what's known as preclinical trial translational work. That's basically the work that's required by an organization or any institution that wants to run a clinical trial. There's a lot of pre-trial work that has to be done. These are things like toxicology studies and early safety studies before you can test a drug in humans. And those are far more expensive than the basic research that we've been funding for the most part up to this point in our 15-year career. Let me also thank. I know we have a few grandparents on the line, so I also want to thank grandparents for the great job all of you did last year in the Grandparent Challenge. We raised over $100,000 in the Grandparent Challenge, and we hope to do that and exceed that again this year. The Grandparent Challenge will be underway sometime in March, not too far after. We have our next upcoming campaign is around Rare Disease Day, which is on February 29th this year. You can think of our Rare Disease Day campaign as being something like a mini holiday challenge campaign. We don't raise as much money in our Rare Disease Day campaign as we do in the Holiday Challenge, but it's starting to build. It will certainly become, I think, a mainstay fundraiser for us in the coming years, and really help help us grow our budget from its current level in the low 2 millions to maybe in a couple of years get to 3 million. That's certainly our goal. On the research front, I want to say that our priorities are fairly similar. They haven't changed a whole lot. This is a very good thing from what they've been in the last couple of years, because we really believe our priorities are focused in the right areas. If you look at our mission, our mission is to discover better treatments and ultimately a cure, and to provide support and clinical support to families who live day in and day out with juvenile dermatomyositis. On the research front, really the focus on better treatments in the short term. I think we're making a lot of progress in this area. I was at the American College of Rheumatology annual conference in November in Atlanta. This is the largest rheumatology conference in the world. I think there's almost 2,500 rheumatologists who attend. A couple hundred pediatric rheumatologists. Not as many pediatric rheumatologists as attend our CARA conference, but nevertheless a significant number. We had 8 or 9 posters in this huge global conference that were funded by JM and by Cure JM. And one of our researchers, Christian Lude from the University of Washington, a new researcher for us, actually delivered a closing plenary remark on his research in juvenile dermatomyositis, which was quite an honor, quite frankly, for Cure JM and for one of our researchers to speak in a closing plenary before some 2,000 rheumatologists from around the world. So just as Cure JM has become a I think, a more significant player with the organization of pediatric rheumatologists. It certainly seemed to me that we were, becoming something of a notable organization at the American Conference, American College, of Rheumatology. It was. But what I really wanted to say, coming out of the American College of Rheumatology conference, was a significant focus on an area where we've been working for the last year to 18 months, pursuing what are known as Janus kinase inhibitors, or JAKs, J-A-K-S for short. So JAKs are repurposed drugs, and they are drugs like baricitinib or tofacitinib. These may be names that you've heard or have crossed your desk or your reading, that are already approved for typically for rheumatic conditions, not juvenile myositis. They're typically approved for rheumatoid arthritis, and approved for adult indications, not juvenile indications. However, we have, for the last couple of years, suspected that they might be really efficacious. Show some where some patients can show some dramatic improvement using these JAK inhibitors in juvenile dermatomyositis. There has been one clinical trial at NIH with a small number of patients for one particular JAK known as baricitinib, and another clinical trial with that same drug, baricitinib, in adults that was conducted at Johns Hopkins University. What we saw in both of those trials was very encouraging. It's essentially in a scoring system for skin conditions. It's known as CDASI, where the skin scores for rash and other skin maladies related to dermatomyositis improved dramatically on this scale, as did muscle strength. And I think in the pediatric trial, muscle strength was particularly important. And what we saw at the American College of Rheumatology was a real significant buzz going through all of the research community about the potential for these JAK inhibitors in other diseases, and for us, for juvenile dermatomyositis. So as we're seeing the evidence of the efficacy of the JAKs, we've really determined, coming out of our board priorities, that we want to fund more research and hopefully faster research in this area specific to juvenile dermatomyositis. There's a second trial coming up at the National Institutes of Health that is being conducted in one of their divisions, which includes Dr. Hannah Kim, who's one of our funded researchers, as well as her supervisor, who's the head of clinical research in this division, Dr. Bob Colbert. And we're pretty certain that they're going to move forward with the second trial, in all probability needing some of our support. And then Dr. Ann Reed, a member of our medical advisory board at Duke University, is also interested in conducting a trial in JAK inhibitors, different JAK inhibitors than baricitinib. And finally, at another program that we fund that's actually funded by the generosity of Marge Coffey on this call, thank you very much, Marge, at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences. They are focusing on a broad array of JAK inhibitors, both approved JAK inhibitors and unapproved JAK inhibitors, meaning that they were developed by a pharmaceutical company but never brought to market because they proved not to be as effective in rheumatoid arthritis, for example, which is their big market. So the pharmaceutical company who owns the patent on this particular JAK inhibitor abandoned the JAK inhibitor, although the drug itself still exists. So there are 5 or 6 JAK inhibitors that are approved in rheumatoid arthritis or related diseases. They all operate in a somewhat slightly different way. They affect different paths that lead to inflammation, and depending upon the particular nature of your disease, essentially how it presents itself. One JAK may be more effective than another JAK, and our objective is to determine which JAKs, approved or unapproved, would seem to be most efficacious in juvenile dermatomyositis. At the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, this is the NCATS program that we fund at NIH. They are now testing and targeting array of about 20 to 25 mostly unapproved JAK inhibitors against essentially JM assays. JM assays is simply a way to measure how juvenile dermatomyositis cells respond to a certain drug. And so coming out of that, we hope to have several specific JAK candidates that we can pursue. Hopefully, these will be approved JAKs that will show indications for efficaciousness, because the road to using an already approved drug in juvenile dermatomyositis is a much shorter and less expensive road than pursuing a drug that is not already approved by the FDA. So this was this was so encouraging that that the board at its recent retreat, as I just mentioned, determined to essentially accelerate the amount of interest and ultimately the amount of financial support that we will be putting into these JAK trials. We are also continuing to pursue this other drug you've all heard of, I think, called vamorolone, which is a steroid replacement. It's what I always call the anti-steroid steroid. It is essentially a drug that its chemical composition is almost identical to prednisone, but because it binds to cell receptors in a slightly different way, it does not have the side effects of prednisone, and has been shown to be efficacious in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. There are 100 patient years, clinical trial years, if you will, of safety testing in Duchenne children. So this drug is shown to be safe, efficacious, and with any luck, knock on wood, will be approved in Duchenne muscular dystrophy when they complete their phase 2B clinical trial, which is underway right now. When they complete that trial, late summer, 60 to 90 days for FDA review and hopefully fast track approval. Once that drug is approved in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, it can be used off-label by clinicians for any disease, including juvenile dermatomyositis. Our strategy around this drug is really to do just that. the investments in safety and the investments in efficacy in DMD have been made already by many governments. This has been supported, frankly, by the governments of the United Kingdom, by NIH, so the US government, as well as by a few private foundations in the Duchenne area. So a lot of the heavy lifting on this has already been done. We will need to do safety trials in females, in girls, because all of the safety trials, Duchenne is a disease that affects only boys. All of the safety trials have been done only in boys. And so we will need to do a safety profile in girls, not so much for because that's not so important for eventual, well, it is important for eventual approval of the drug, but it's not so important for off-label use of the drug, except that most responsible clinicians would want to know that this drug is safe in girls before they utilize it. And hence we'll need to have a trial, even though the safety trial, even though the trial isn't directed so much towards approval as it is towards safety. So I hope I didn't screw up that comment too much, to cause too much confusion, but a safety trial in girls followed by off-label use, which could happen, maybe as early as 12 months after the approval in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So we continue to be very, very excited about the potential for vamorolone. There are some short-term hurdles. The biggest hurdle has to do with the pharmaceutical company who will ultimately own the drug. They don't own the drug right now. They have an option to own the drug that we're pretty confident they will exercise that option. And we still need to make sure that juvenile dermatomyositis is high on their list of potential indications for this drug. So they don't block, if you will, our access to the drug to use in clinical trials for off-label use. We have a terrific relationship with the company who owns the drug right now, but they're not going to own the drug in the future. So kind of a long-winded way of saying, in addition to doing this trial, we also have a lot of lobbying and cultivation, if that's the right word, with the new owners to make sure that they are on the CureJM team as we try to do that. And then ultimately, we're going to need to have the FDA as a partner in this. The FDA is already familiar with vamorolone because of the DMD work. They're familiar with the company that developed the drug, ReveraGen, in Rockville, Maryland, and they're somewhat familiar with us. So really making sure that FDA pathway is an open road for us, as well as the pathway with the future owners of the drug, is equally important to the success of the clinical trial. So that's those are really, I think, the major highlights of what we're doing in drug development. I do want to say one more thing about the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, the program at NIH that's doing all of the drug testing and now focused pretty intently on the JAK drugs, is they are also screening about the entire, I shouldn't say about, it's the entire library of known toxins, some of which are candidates and likely environmental triggers for juvenile dermatomyositis. So because we have this juvenile dermatomyositis assay that we've created within the NCATS lab, is we can not only test this assay against drugs to see which drugs generate a response, we can also test this juvenile dermatomyositis assay against toxins to see which toxins upregulate or downregulate juvenile dermatomyositis cells in this process. As it turns out, NIH has this, what they call them, a library. So NIH has a library of these 20,000 toxins that is being made available to us to test in this high throughput screening process against JM. And hopefully what we'll see here is that there are certain toxins, and in particular we're talking about chemical toxins, like the kind of chemicals that you might find in municipal drinking water systems, for example, or toxins that would be found in the air, in air pollution, or toxins that are created by diesel exhaust emissions. All these kinds of toxins are testable, if you will, now against these juvenile dermatomyositis assays. Very important, because we've long suspected that there have been toxins, essentially environmental triggers for this disease, and we're now able to sort of test against it to see if JDM cells, are actually upregulated or downregulated by any of these toxins. This is something that Dr. Lisa Ryder, who is the chair of our medical advisory board, is particularly excited about. She has dedicated her entire career to understanding the role of environmental influences in JDM, and this lab experiment, so to speak, may shed some light on particular toxins that seem to be most noteworthy. So we're also very excited about that project within this project, within our future priorities. And then finally, I think what I want to say is, in about 6 months we will have a report from a project that we funded phase 1 last year on trying to understand what triggers flares. This is a project that's being funded at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands. We're very excited that what they essentially are doing is something that's kind of similar to what I was talking about in NCATS, except that they're looking at different kinds of MSAs, myositis specific antibodies that all JM kids have. They have one or more antibodies that influence myositis and how myositis presents itself. And they're looking at what triggers the upregulation of those myositis specific antibodies as essentially a precursor, if you will, for flaring. That report, they've been working on this for the last year. That report is due in about 6 months, and we'll have some preliminary information that might hopefully be available to all of you at that time before any paper is published. But the reason I want to particularly bring that up is what we're also attempting to do and want to do within our research program is kind of a balance between the basic sort of long-term, this is the kind of work that needs to be done to better understand this disease and gain the knowledge that will one day lead to a cure, and more practical applications that all of you as parents and grandparents can put to work today to not only improve the quality of care, but improve the outcomes that your children and grandchildren have in the shorter term. So that's always a kind of a tricky balance for what we're doing in working to improve clinical care, but also, generate enough new research data, whether that's around nutrition, whether that's around exercise, whether that's around off-label use of drugs, such as these JAKs that we were talking about. Off-label use of other drugs. Many of your children or grandchildren are using some of those drugs now. Abatacept is one, for example. Rituximab is another, that are increasingly being used effectively in treating and caring for JM children. And as we understand what those drugs do, and which children are likely to be responsive and which children more likely to be unresponsive to those drugs, we feel that that's something in the short term that will be extremely beneficial to our families. We've also made some significant investments in two relatively new centers. You've probably heard from me before on these, one at Seattle Children's in Seattle, which covers a 4-state area in the Pacific Northwest, and now at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, which covers a 4 or 5-state area, sort of in the lower southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, most of Virginia, some of Georgia, some of northern Florida. So sort of generally the catchment area at Duke. They also have very strong research programs at both of those institutions. I mentioned Kristen Lube from the University of Washington. He's a part of our Seattle center, and we are funding his research there. So stay tuned to see some additional centers or financial support at a minimum coming online to other institutions. Hopefully in the near future, in the next year or two, as we work to expand that clinical footprint that we have in other states and regions around the country where we're not as active as we want to be. Let me stop there and see if any of you have any questions at this point. I'd be happy to answer any that you might have. Don, Shannon, can you think of anything? Did I cover most of what you were looking for, or is there a couple other things you'd like me to touch on?
I think you did. Let me make sure everyone now is unmuted. So do we have any questions from the group? They might have been on mute earlier.
Okay.
I do have a question. This is Kelly from Pittsburgh. Can you repeat the name? Hello. I appreciate everything that you just updated us all with. Can you repeat the name of the drug that you were referring to as the anti-steroid steroid?
Yes. It's called vamorolone, VAMOROLONE. And there's a fair amount of data, I think, that you can find on the internet in DMD around vamorolone.
Okay.
And its background. The company who we are working with, who currently owns the rights to vamorolone, is called Reveragen, REVERAGEN, and they are in Rockville, Maryland.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Two other things quickly. I probably should have touched on that came out of our board planning retreat in Austin was our ongoing commitment fund the expansion of mental health services for JM kids. As we all know, many of our JM kids often struggle with issues around around being different, around weight gain, for example, if they're long-term prednisone or any even short-term prednisone users, but prednisone users, about just the general difficulty and challenges that that these brave kids, our JM warriors, are dealing with day in and day out, particularly those who have more chronic conditions. And so we know that there are mental health issues that many of these kids are dealing with. I don't think our board would mind my saying that many of the children of our board members are struggling with some of these issues, and the board and many of our families around the country, based on some of the focus groups we've done and the interviews we've done, really realize the need for mental health services, not just for JM kids, but in pediatric rheumatology anyway, any kid who's dealing with a chronic disease, and particularly a disease that is as debilitating as JM can be. So we're continuing to focus our efforts there. We've got some great partnerships going with institutions like Colorado Children's, for example, Seattle Children's, I've mentioned earlier, Montefiore in New York, all institutions that are really bringing their expertise to us in terms of training materials and other kinds of outreach we can do to, number one, educate parents about the importance of looking for mental health issues as their children find their way through this, managing this disease, and clinicians themselves who I think it's probably fair to say some clinicians are kind of tone deaf on the mental health issues, or haven't really focused their own attention on mental health to a level that I think many of our parents think they should. So this is a huge project in terms of the potential impact it could have on kids, but it's also a huge project because it's a little bit like turning a battleship, is to get an entire community of pediatric rheumatologists to start investing more of their time and effort in clinical care, assuring that mental health needs of patients are met, is something new to many of them, and it'll take a big push from us to really move the needle on that one. But we are committed to doing that. A second issue, important issue, I think, also is this whole issue of transition. What happens to JM kids when they transition out of pediatrics and into adult care? And this has been an area that it's not specific to juvenile myositis. It's specific to lots of pediatric diseases when kids can no longer be seen by their pediatric specialists. And that's particularly true in juvenile dermatomyositis. Many of our kids who are 19, 20, 21, 22 are still seeing pediatric rheumatologists, essentially because of the grace of the institution where they're being seen, to allow that to continue to move on past the age of 18. It's kind of a short-term Band-Aid. It's sort of been the way it's always been, but it's not a good long-term solution for children who will be living with this disease into their 20s and 30s and beyond. And so, because so many adult rheumatologists are completely unequipped to deal effectively with this disease, we feel the need to create more partnerships and educational partnerships with the adult rheumatic providers, and especially those who might be familiar with adult myositis but not juvenile dermatomyositis. in order to identify, it may be just a handful, 20 or 25 adult rheumatologists who understand this disease well enough to take care of patients, or to, at a minimum, refer patients to a colleague who can do that. So that's it's another, big project for us. Currently, that's a project that is not funded, but one that we're actively looking for a funder. It's probably a project that'll run in the neighborhood of $100,000 a year for several years to get that kind of momentum going throughout the adult rheumatological providers. Now I'll stop again and see if you have any questions.
Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is Rebecca Karsten, Ellery's mom.
Hi, how are you, Rebecca?
Good. Haven't seen you since our walk.
Yes, that's right. When I was trying to give you a break and carry Ellery.
I know, that would have been nice. She's pretty
Yes.
pretty heavy to carry the whole time. Anyways, I had a question for you regarding I guess it falls under the mental health category, because we, and Ellery too, find ourselves getting almost depressed from kind of the chronic pain aspect of the JDM. And even after switching physicians, most physicians that the parents report, they keep saying kids have more like growing pains, and it's not from JDM. But I'm wondering if you can incorporate that in our next, Cure JM big meeting with the physicians to get them more on board with the pain control. And then also if you wanted to do a seminar like this about pain control, what are we as the parents and the, supposed to do for our kids that have chronic pain, even in medical remission or while they're medicated? That's my question.
That is a great idea, Rebecca. I've just made a note of that, and
Okay.
I will bring that to our medical advisory board.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll report back to you on what I learned.
Oh, thank you. Well, Ellery will be thrilled, as well we will, her parents. Thank
That's
you.
great.
Okay, so everyone is unmuted now, so speak up. I think there's a couple more questions on the line, it looks like.
Hey, Shannon, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is David
Hey,
Taylor.
David.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Jim, you had actually two questions. You mentioned the toxicity studies that were going on 20,000 toxic, whatever they are.
Yes, yes.
When would you expect some sort of results from that? And, could that be used by us to sort of test our local environment?
David, I don't know the answer to that, but I have a meeting on the 28th of this month at NCATS with Dr. Reiter as well. We'll get some preliminary results of the outcomes of this test. The tox tests were run in December. So I'll probably have a little bit of early information in this meeting on the 28th, and I'll ask that question about the sort of practical local applications, and I don't know that I would guess that we probably won't have much of an answer to that on the 28th, but I'll see if I can find find out, what kind of the time frame might look like for that, and report back to you as well.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. You had mentioned the non-steroid steroid, and you had said there could be a delay because of the testing on girls. Will that apply to boys as well, or could it be approved for boys earlier?
Oh no, well, the the approval will I think be will be generic. So when it's approved for DMD, it will become an approved drug that can be used for both boys and girls. It's just that what the feedback that we've received from our clinicians and from our medical advisory board is that they would be very careful, and some parents, and probably most parents, would want to know that there was no harm that this drug caused to girls. I think particularly, harm that that could be related to reproductive health, and without having those studies for girls, clinicians might hesitate to use it in girls because the safety studies have only been done in boys. So we really want the safety studies not for approval, but for, I guess you might call it sort of like clinical observations that a clinician has read this paper, that the study was done in 10 female dogs, and then the study was done in 10 females between the ages of 12 and 18, and this is what we found.
Right.
And once that paper is published, clinicians will be more comfortable prescribing it in girls. And again, many clinicians have said, Jim, our first duty as a doctor is do no harm. So they want to make sure that prednisone, it's highly unlikely that there would be issues in girls. There were no issues, by the way, that we're aware of in female dogs where some of the tox studies were done for DMD. So I think we're optimistic that there's not an issue there. However, we need the proof. So that's really what's driving that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Are other questions on the line? We did have one come in on chat, Jim. If you might elaborate a little bit more, if a family was interested in participating in a research study with a JAK inhibitor, is that an option for families, or are those enrollments closed?
No, that's definitely an option. And what I'd suggest if you are interested is just send me an email, james.minow, M-I-N-O-W at curejm.org, and I'll make sure that your name gets in front of the researchers at Duke or NIH that will be conducting that next study, that larger study in JAK inhibitors. Just briefly, the way that typically happens is a clinical trial study is designed by the researcher, and it has what are it has what are called outcomes or endpoints. And so you're looking for certain endpoints, and then you also, in the process of designing the trial, and the trial design is what it's called actually, is to reach those endpoints, you will propose that you would enroll X number of patients, so many males, so many females, between the ages of X and Y, whatever the ages are, and who have the following clinical manifestations of disease. So once that's designed, then they'll actually look at what patients fit that profile. And so I believe that at least at NIH, I don't know about Duke, but at NIH, I think the clinical profile will probably, for recruitment, will probably be pretty similar to what the first trial was. I'm not positive exactly what that was. I know that the patients tended to be on the older scale, 15, 16, 17, in that range, not 6, 7, and 8. And that's also pretty typical in early trials is as you want to start at the older ages and work your way to the lower ages. Start at the higher ages, work your way to the lower ages. But send me the information, including age and that kind of stuff, and I'll make sure that that Hannah and Bob receive that.
Okay, let me unmute again. Okay. Any more questions on the line or on chat?
No, just thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the information. It's very interesting. Helpful.
Well, and thank all of you so much. As I mentioned, you are really the drivers of our success. We've always been a family-oriented, parent-run, grandparent-run, patient-run organization, and we rely very heavily on your leadership and participation. So, thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you again for helping make the Holiday Challenge such a big success.